This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen joining you here this afternoon. We got a great guest going to be coming on in just a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to say hello, and I hope everybody had a wonderful Easter. I hope everybody's having a wonderful, wonderful week so far. And I hope everybody's been happy and content. And God bless you all so much for taking the time to join us here on this program. A quick reminder that you can catch some of my past programs, which are pretty darn good, I got to admit, on DBTV.TV. Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Just go to DBTV.TV, and you can catch me at 7 p.m. That's Main Street on DBTV.TV at 7 p.m. And speaking of DBTV, the gentleman who's going to be joining us now, it happens to be Mr. David Brunner, or DB. He's the owner and CEO of DBTV Networks, which is seen worldwide, which is a fantastic platform. I know, as you know, I'm on it. He's an award-winning reporter, former news director, also a director of talent for a number of networks throughout the country, as well as the man behind DB and Associates, which used to be a talent agency for a lot of the young people, and some of the anchors that you see, news, sports, weather, etc., around the country came through DB and Associates. I've known DB for well over 10 years. He's been a dear friend of mine for a very long time. We call each other up all the time and tell some of the weirdest jokes in the world, which you cannot repeat in this program, because you know I'm a family-friendly program. Without further ado, would you please welcome the man behind the curtain at DBTV, Mr. David Brunner.
Thank you. What a great buildup. I hope that I can stay up to this.
Well, I hope so too, but I have a feeling you'll be able to withstand everything, and we'll be able to continue moving forward. As I said, you are an Emmy award-winning reporter. You have been in the business for decades. I've known you for about 15 years now or so. We've been good friends. Was broadcasting when you were growing up as a young man, like not for me so much because I wanted to be an airline pilot, but I was always fascinated by radio, Larry King and everybody else. Was that something that you always had in your mind? That's where I want to go. That's the direction I want to take my life.
Yeah, I think when I was in 5th or 6th grade, I think I wanted to become a sports writer, wanted to write for the local paper, do sports. Then I think 7th, 8th grade, I thought, radio's the thing. Radio's the place to be. Radio's exciting. Radio. And then it was, I think, 10th or 11th grade where I went, you know what, radio's cool, but I think I eventually want to do TV. But it was something that I always wanted to do. I was trying to think back if there was one incident where I can remember, or I wish I could say I met somebody who I idolized and said, you got to go on TV or radio. Not really, but I just thought, like you, that it was and still is. It's an interesting platform. It's great.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to intern at WIOD in Miami when I went to University of Miami. I wasn't in high school. I wanted to be an airline pilot like my dad and his brothers. So I didn't do the thing when I was in high school to go intern at the local radio stations, which would have given me a jump on my career, probably quite a bit. Learning back then in my middle to late teens, like some people do, and people that I know of that are in the business today. But I went into a college radio station by accident one day, and I went, "Oh, yeah, this is what it's all about." And that's what vaccinated me. And the guy who introduced me to it all is still alive, living in Miami. And I'm going to take a baseball bat to him one of these days and get him for introducing me to into the industry, and which was at the University of Miami. What was it like your first day when you got what was your first job in the business?
I heard from, one great thing about hanging around a radio station or hanging around a TV station is you get to know people and they tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
And you're the first to hear when there's an opening. And I remember I was hanging around the radio station. I think I was 18. And somebody said, hey, the news director is going on vacation for 2 weeks, and they're going to need somebody to fill in. Really? Well, I'm interested. I was there, and I got my first job doing that. So I don't know if I wasn't hanging around the radio station, if I didn't know people, whether I would have heard about that job or not. And things like that happen by accident all the time.
Yeah.
So, and I was hooked, man. I mean, even though it was news, I was hooked. And of course, the greatest thing in the world is your friends hear you, your family hears you. So
Yeah.
even if you suck, it's still great because you're told how great you are.
Yeah. I can't imagine that happening today, because what the business is like today, and we're going to get into that as we move down the road here a little bit. But what was it like for you that first time when the light went on and the little thing says you're on the air? What was it like for you? Nervous or?
Oh yeah, I mean, even doing it now, even any kind of telephone interview, radio interview, something like this, a podcast interview, you still kind of get a little excited. I think if you don't, then you shouldn't be around. You're always excited about what's going to happen, what you're going to say. But I was so young when I did it that you just say, "Oh, hey, I was great. Wasn't great. It was fantastic," and you probably weren't. But boy, when you do it and you get that feedback instant, boy, there's nothing better. Then I realized, well, hey, you get the same in TV, but they actually see you in TV. More people recognize you in TV. So you go from radio thinking, oh, TV.
Well, I always was happy the fact that I did radio, because who really is going to want anything to do with this face? You know what I mean?
I know. But you know what people would say to me when I was an agent for 31 years, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And people would say to me, hey, if you weren't an agent, what would you do? Would you go back being a reporter? I go, oh, I would love to go back and do radio. But as you know, radio now, and it wasn't what it used to be. When you and I were in radio was radio, baby. But it's not that. It's not that anymore. Now it's just voice tracking and things like that. So
yeah, and even when I was doing stuff in radio on a regular basis, it was 12 at night till 6 in the morning for Larry, interning for him, and then eventually working for him, because that was his time. But I did work at Power 96 and Y100, a few other stations, and people would hear me, and kids that I went to high school with would say, "Wait a minute, you're that Gary Allen?" Because they couldn't acquaint, because Gary Allen is my first and middle name, and I have a legal last name. And they go, "Oh, you're the Gary Allen. Oh, wow." And even women who wouldn't pay any more attention to me then in high school are suddenly like, "Oh, you're Gary Allen. Whoa."
What's funny? I went to write a bio.
Yeah.
It might have been for you. And I said, you know what? I never really thought, and I was trying to put down all the stations and TV stations that I worked at.
Yeah.
And you do it, you say, no, wait a minute. I was at KAP before. You would think that even if you worked years at a station, it would be, you reel them off 3, 4, 5. But then you realize, no, wait a minute. I was at KAP before I was at GPA, and I was at AEB before I was at, and you end up redoing it again. And it's funny too, how a lot of times you end up going back to another station that you had already worked at. I'm sure that happened to you, and that happened to me a couple times too. I think I worked at WKAP, I think 3 different times under 3 different program directors.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of my contemporary friends and we all worked at the same stations in Miami at one time, WINZ. I had my very first internship was at WINZ. I worked in the news department. And one Saturday I went in to do some internship work, which was taking the little razor blade and cutting off the tape off of the reels. You remember, almost everybody I know did that at one point or another. And somebody didn't show up for their on-air shift. So I ended up reading the news. And that's how I got my first start on the air. And boy, I was nervous as a bug in the rug, I want to tell you. But everybody said, "Hey, you did a great job. Hey, why don't you come on back? The person who didn't show up, we're not going to have around anymore." But the money was not very good. I got to tell you, it was like, I think $5.30 an hour or something like that, if it was that.
When I got my first radio job, I think I got $160 a week, and I thought I was a millionaire. I thought, boy, this is a great way to make money, isn't this?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it's basically, except for those few seconds of nerves. But that's not something you can do today, is it? I mean, you can't hang around the radio station anymore. The mom and pops are gone that would give you the opportunity to fail a few times. And there is an old adage in our business, David, and you know this oh too well, that if in your first couple of years, if you haven't been fired once or twice, there's something wrong with you.
Also, you and I worked when somebody had to physically be at the radio station, and you physically had to have somebody with a first-class radio license on the premises at all time. Plus, you have to take these hourly readings. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, if people tell me that if you find anybody at a radio station after 5 p.m., you'll be very lucky, because there's no need to have anybody there. The announcers are on tape. The salespeople are out. Nobody needs to take any readings or anything. So, radio stations are desolate now.
Yeah, basically they really are, and it's with AI. It's not making it any easier. And voice tracking and everything else that's going on. I mean, I know some on-air people that work like in Chicago. They'll do a morning shift in Chicago, and then they do a midday shift in Houston, Texas. Same radio company, but they're doing a couple of shifts to try to make a living.
And
the money isn't
too, Gary. Like they'll do they'll be part of a country format in the morning, and they'll be middays at a top 40. And then they'll do voice tracking for an oldies format in afternoons. It's amazing.
Explain to people who don't know about voice tracking.
I'm probably not the best person to explain, but you basically go into a room, and a lot of people, it's their spare bedroom. It's a spare closet, from what people tell me. And they go in and they basically do a 4-hour show in about 45 minutes. They know they have a list of songs in front of them, and they say, okay, I'm going to talk after every third or fourth song. They put it all on a tape, and it's broken up, and boom, you do a 4-hour shift in like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. We've talked about this. I love all my friends in radio and TV, but every city has its own personality.
Yes, it does.
Every city has a different heartbeat.
Yes.
And what plays in Cincinnati doesn't necessarily play in Cleveland or Miami or Allentown.
Yep.
You can drive from Maine to California, and you'll hear the same songs at the same time if you're listening to a big conglomerate. And there's no, people still want to know, where are the ice cream festivals this weekend?
Yeah.
What's going on at my kid's school? What are the movies that are in town? What's going on? Are there plays? And you just don't get that, because you're having somebody in Baltimore programming your radio station, and you live in North and South Dakota. There's just no intimacy. There's no,
and there's also no personalities anymore. I remember morning shows would be competing against one another for the advertising dollar, and there'd be personalities that would actually invent new creative thoughts, ideas, gimmicks, games, etc., etc. Even on the weekends, you'd have the weekend anchors doing that. You don't have that anymore, and that's the terrible part. And the reason that I was able to stick around for a while in South Florida before I moved to California was I did all those impressions, which you were very surprised about, which you found out that I do through our dear friend he and I want to do a radio show together. And that's John Lieberman, who's a dear friend of mine, and to you as well. John and I work very, very well together, as well as Dave Lamont, who does the show with me when we do sports, along with Jeff DeForest. By the way, David Brunner is our guest, or DB as he's known in the industry. He's the president, owner, and CEO of DBTV.TV. Please check it out. More information, you want to contact him. If you have a podcast show that you'd like to put on the air, get a hold of David at info@dbtv.tv. Also, please watch my show on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. on dbtv.tv at 7 p.m. Tuesday nights. Some of my past shows, even David is tuned in to watch a few. So that's even more. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning DBTV TV, but also anybody who has a Roku, anybody who has Amazon Fire Stick, you can watch the Main Street as well, and you can watch DBTV.
Yeah, and I am so pleased that you brought me on the network. It's always been fun. But yeah, I mean, getting back to what we're saying, there was personalities, afternoon drive, morning drive, the even the guy midday guy at lunchtime. There'd be some kind of going on, and almost every morning show, whether it be talk show or music, because talk was not that big back when you and I were beginning out. It was mostly music, and talk was entirely different anyway. They always had a breakfast club somewhere on a Saturday morning
Yeah.
or on a Sunday morning, or they'd have a get together once a month with their fans at some local restaurant. And that would be testing the market to see who's watching, who isn't, who's paying attention to the scene. There's
And
none of that
but
goes
also,
on anymore.
Gary, great promotions.
Yes.
I mean, I come from the town that had the great billboard promotion that everybody talked about. That was a big thing. Remember that? The three guys who lived on the billboard
Oh,
in
yeah.
Whitehall, Pennsylvania. I mean, that's my hometown. That was a big deal. You don't have any of that anymore. No, I mean,
No.
they would give away anything from records to cars. I mean,
Mhm.
that radio was great. Now, good luck trying to find a contest.
You
You
know,
know?
I always wanted to do something that you're going to say is crazy. I'm from Wilkes-Barre, and you know that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm being a Phillies fan the way I am. I always wanted to maybe go back to Wilkes-Barre for a very short period of time and just have fun doing a talk show. I wasn't the greatest spinner when it came to music, although back in those days, folks, it wasn't carts, it wasn't CDs, it wasn't anything. It was actual albums that you would play, and you had turntables and everything else like that. Then the carts came later and stuff like that, and they were looked like an 8-track, only a little bit larger, and they would fit into a machine. It would have the music on it, blah, 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 blah. But I always thought, David, and I know that if I knew you back then, I probably could have got a job at Wilkes-Barre because you had connections in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre.
Well, you know what's funny? I tell this story. I think it was about 15. It might have been maybe a little more, maybe 17, 18 years ago. I got the bug, and I was tired of hearing my radio people, my radio clients telling me how radio had changed and how the romance was out of it. I thought,
Yeah.
really, is it? So I said, this summer, I'm gonna get a job. I'm gonna try to get a job in radio.
Yeah.
So I ended up calling a local station in my hometown of Allentown, and I got hired right away. It was an adult contemporary station,
Mhm.
and so I go there for the first day, to interview, and the guy's taking me around, and I thought that I had missed the newsroom. So I said, "Oh, did I miss the newsroom?" And the guy's like, "Newsroom? Are you kidding me? Boy, it's been a long time since you've been in a newsroom, radio station, pal." So he takes me into the studio, and it looked like my wife's office at work. It was a small cubicle. It
Yeah.
was, it was in front. There was no. I was looking for the cart machines. I was looking for the turntables with the with the big turntables and the pink you know stuff that was being torn off the turntables. Looking for
Right.
and I couldn't believe it. It was the size of half of my office, and I'm like, "This is the studio." Yeah, I thought, "Oh man." So I thought, okay, I can hardly wait to the request lines. Give out the phone number, and that was what was really fun about radio. And
Yeah.
and we go, no, we don't. We do research. We know who our listeners are. We really don't care. We put the phone on hold on the weekends. We don't like to take phone calls. Are you
What?
kidding me?
Oh my
That
God.
takes. I mean, you talk about, and all my friends asked me. They said, "Well, when was the bloom off the rose?" I said, "First shift."
Yeah.
Because because I couldn't do the thing that I thought was fun. You know, I not taking phone calls and being confined in this really small room. It wasn't. I mean, and everything was right there, as you know. Everything was there. All the
Yep.
music, all the commercials, everything was in that computer. And also, the on-off switch had it so that if you talked longer than, I think it was 13 seconds, you were cut off. So you had to make sure that what you said was very, you give the call letters, you give the time. You don't really have time to do much else.
No, and that's the part that really kills us the most. But do a lot of the young people? I'm going on a little bit ahead of myself here, but the people you used to rep, I mean, it was mostly television and stuff like that. But the radio people that you used to rep, do they realize, even television people, that they're going to have to go work in a small to medium market to even start making start cutting their teeth and putting their sizzle reel together, which sizzle reel, for those of you who don't know, is their audition reel that they would send in to news directors and stuff to see if they can move up in the, in the ranks and
Most
move
people
up the
think,
chamber.
the majority of people think that everyone in television makes a lot of money.
No.
So, well, that's what most people think. So when you tell people, by the way, the reporter has to start in, say, a Cheyenne, Wyoming, or a Moselle, Mississippi. And back when I was an agent, I mean, we're talking about $18,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you would go there and people would say, oh my God, how can somebody live on 16,000? And I said, well, you got to understand two things. First of all, it's their first job. It's right out of college. Hey, I'm a reporter. I'm a TV star. I got a job right out of college. They don't know. And this it's their first job. So they never lived on 16,000. They know they can't live on 16,000. So at the end of the first month, they call their parents up and say, listen, do I pay my rent or do I eat next month? So they would get help from their parents. But I also tell people there's a line of people who will do it for 12 and 14,000 a year. So as long as you have that line of people who will do it for less, you'll have the line of 16. Now it has gotten better. I retired from agenting last fall, and it was up to 23, 24, 25 in some markets. Still very minimal for somebody who's a professional who's gone to school for 4 years. I got to tell you a quick story about how bad it is. My wife and I were in a McDonald's, and I saw a sign that said closers, $18 an hour. I didn't know what a closer was. I thought a closer was, Raleigh Fingers or Tug McGraw or, Trevor Huffman. Those are closers, right?
Yeah.
So, I said to the manager, what's a closer? And they said, oh, that's somebody who works the later shift, the night shift, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, closes the preps for the breakfast, but closes, people don't usually like to work that shift. We give them a couple extra dollars. Oh, that's interesting. $18 an hour. Okay. I came home that day, and I don't want to mention the city, but I had a news director from a town call me, a nice size market, around 90, 100 in there. And he said, I'm looking for a main anchor. I'm looking for a weekend anchor. I'm looking for a chief meteorologist. I'm looking for 3 MMJs, which we have to tell people, those are reporters, multimedia journalists who go out and shoot the packages and the news stories that you see. Mm-hmm. So I was getting what the salaries were. And then it came to the MMJs. And I said, how much are you paying? And the guy said, 14. And I went, oh, 14,000 a year. He goes, no, we start our photog MMJs up at $14 an hour. So I figured, I'm going to be retiring soon, so I might as well speak up. So I told him, I was just at a McDonald's where they're paying people $18 an hour. Isn't it a shame what this business has come to, where somebody who's gone to school and a journalism major, 4 years, wants to go out and tell stories, professional reporter, journalist, and they're getting paid $4 less than somebody who flips burgers? I mean, that's absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I want to do one more question on the time you were in radio. How has being a reporter changed a lot? I mean, I know the technology has changed, and doing the stand-up, which for those of you, what we're referring to, somebody standing up in the middle of the street reporting on whatever happened. That's why they're there. How much has that changed a lot in the kids' minds who want to be in television?
Well, you have to understand that in the old days, a reporter would do one story a day, sometimes 2, but normally 1. And also they usually would have help. Now in the old days, on the network level, you had a producer, you had your cameraman, you had a person doing lights, and the reporter. There was 4 people on a story. But recently it was just the cameraman, maybe a producer if it was a longer story or network, and the reporter. Now it's just the reporter, and he's doing everything. And you're asked to do up to 3 stories a day, which is, think about it, 8-hour day, and you're supposed to do 3 stories. They're only allowed to stay at each place no more than an hour. They have to go to a bistro or someplace or a coffee house at 3 o'clock to sit and edit their pieces. In fact, if you go to any city, you'll probably see somebody sitting there with a latte with their head in the computer. They're actually editing their stories for broadcast. Then they have to write a couple more for the website, and you're doing the same thing the next day. So you're doing 3+ stories every day, and then you're doing it again the next day. It's a shame. I even hate to say that you're really more of a recorder than you are a reporter.
Yeah. What types for somebody who's watching, and we have David Brunner on from DBTV .TV. He is a former reporter, news director, Emmy award-winning reporter. What are the skill sets that one must have nowadays to get even involved in journalism? I mean, besides the impulse and the the interest in it, there has to be more to it now, because
Well,
most people.
I still think you need to be a good writer. I mean, because you're still, writing stories, informing people, entertaining people. So I still think you need to be a good writer. Sometimes people don't think about that, but you should. You should still always have a curiosity element.
Yeah.
You're curious because you want to find out what's going on, and but it's really you have to really be hardworking, and you have to realize that I have to go to a Cheyenne, Wyoming for a year or two. Then I have to go to another market for a year or two. Then I can think about getting into a Wilkes-Barre or a Philadelphia or a Boston. I mean, people, the one thing I used to get a kick out of is I would have people in the business say to me, well, I've been working in Moline, Illinois now for 8 months. I paid my dues. I'm ready for Good Morning America now.
Oh, geez.
Not quite. I mean,
not really. No.
So everybody thinks that they're a lot better than they are. Sometimes you're lucky. Now, the way things are now in TV, you can come right out of college and you can end up working in a market like Scranton, which normally that used to be a second or third stop for people. Now you can go to even in New York, the fact that your people are one-man banding, you can work in a very big market right out of college. But it's like going right out of college into playing professional baseball. You really need that AA, AAA seasoning. You got to learn how to do it. How to be consistent on an everyday basis. Unfortunately, a lot of students aren't prepared for that. They make a big jump and they find out after 5 or 6 months, boy, this really isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And it's the same thing as me. People will say, gee, Gary, I can do interviews like you do. And I say, yeah, but do you have the years behind you that I do? Not only as an on-air personality in radio, but as a stand-up comic, as an actor. I mean, I bring a lot of different things to the table that help me maneuver around. And I'm very curious about a lot of things. How did you deal with, as an agent, with the super ego kids that thought, hey, I just got out of Penn State, or I just got out of wherever, and I'm going to go work Chicago or New York or Orlando and Miami's a tough market to get into anyway, and I'm not going to settle for Cheyenne, Wyoming or Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
I was very honest when people would call me up. Some already knew that that's the route they'd have to take. But other people, you have to be pretty honest with them and say, look, this is kind of the way it goes. I don't think you're ready to start in a top 50, top 60 market. If you feel differently, I'm probably not your guy, because I always thought it was important that if you were going to work with somebody, that the agent and the talent were on the same page. So I knew that if I took somebody who wasn't ready or wasn't going to be happy with going to a small market right away, it probably wasn't going to be a successful relationship. So why even bother?
Yeah. I mean, it is tough. I mean, it really is tough. And the thing is that somebody said to me once, and I did some sideline reporting in the Arena Football League, but by the time that the media opened up, for sideline reporters and for some of the things that the people do in the media now, it wasn't there until like the middle 80s when the NFL really expanded. So for me and by then I was already moving on to other things and doing other things. My biggest mistake is when I lived in LA, I should have tried to get into some radio stations to continue on, because who knows where I would or wouldn't be. But I didn't have any background except for what I did in Miami, and I didn't have any current sizzle reel of any kind. So it kind of sizzled out. What are some of the common misconceptions about broadcasters and broadcasting and the business in general that you run into on a regular basis, even now running DBTV as you do?
One is that everybody thinks that they're great, that their show is great, that their talent is great. Maybe it is, but not as great as they think it is. So you still have people who understand this is the route you have to take. You have some people who say, why am I not working in Philadelphia, New York, and LA after 3 months or after I get out of school?
Yeah.
And I think the other misconception is that people in big markets make big money. People working at the networks make big money, but people who are working in small towns and really working hard aren't making good money. So you have to think about that, and it's going to be a while until you are.
Yeah.
So, but I still think that's a big misconception that I'm going to be making big money here very shortly.
Now, I have a very good friend of mine, Craig Stevens, who has been on this program along with my good friend Patrick Frazier from Channel 7. And when he was working in Fort Myers, he said, Gary, I used to try to find extra if people left chips on their desk at night that I would eat because I couldn't even afford to eat at times, and I know that feeling. As a young actor, you go through it too. I mean, there's not you're not immune from shortcutting anything. My dad always used to say, you can't shortcut anything. You have to experience everything from the bottom up. My mother was an interior decorator. She learned how to upholster furniture, how to make the drapes, how to do this, how to do that. And you can't be fooled, whereas some of these young PDs that are out there, they don't have the experience that say you and I do, or John Lieberman, or my friend Russ Oasis, or some of my other good friends that were in the business at one time. They don't have that experience.
I had a client who was a female. This goes back a few years.
Real quick, let me do this. We have David Brunner on from DBTV. Please join in and watch My Main Street, which is on DBTV Tuesday nights at 7. And for more information on DBTV, you can go to info@dbtv.tv. You can also go to dbtv.com. And you can find out more information there about it too. And Mr. David Brunner, who is the owner, operator, CEO, chief cook and bottle washer, the man behind the Iron Curtain, and behind any curtain, he is my guest and friend. Go ahead, David. What were you going to say?
And by the way, we do respond. We love to hear what people say about our shows. We want to know who they like, who they don't like, suggestions for shows that we're not doing. We really do respond. So you're not just writing and not caring.
Yep.
I had a young lady who got a job as a sports director, which means she worked Monday through Friday. It's a very small market, and I remember the money was. So this dates it. She was making, I think, $15,000 a year, which is ridiculous. But she ended up getting a job as a waitress at a club, at a country club on weekends. And people started seeing her and saying, "Hey, aren't you the girl who does sports during the week at the local station?" And she said, DB, I'm not embarrassed that I'm working as a waitress. I'm embarrassed that my station doesn't pay me enough that I have to go and get a second job. So she would say to people, no, you're confused. No, you're confusing me. I'm not her. It took the general manager of that station, turned out to be a member of the country club. He got tired of people coming up to him and saying, hey, aren't you ashamed of yourself that you've got somebody working for you, who at your TV station has to come here and work a weekend shift? So she got called in, and he said, look, I'll make a deal with you. Leave your job at the club. I'll give you $3,000. Now, it still wasn't a lot of money, but at least he didn't do anything until he was embarrassed that his station wasn't paying anything. She ended up having to get another job. But I mean, that's just a fine example of what you have to do to go through to get to the next level.
Oh yeah, I mean, it really is. The money isn't there anymore. I mean, with these major corporations that have
and radio's worse. Yeah.
Oh yeah, which reminds me, do you think AM is really dead?
That I have a thing about when COVID hit. I felt that this was the time for AM. This was their last hurrah. All the AM stations get together because if you remember at that time, there was so much information coming out, but you could only get it on TV. I thought that the AM stations in each town could get together, broadcast all the news at the same time, share news people, share newsroom. So because, things were changing. I mean, if a store was open at 10 a.m., it could have been closed at 12 o'clock already. and you weren't getting that information unless you put on the news at 6 o'clock that night. So my
Yeah.
idea was AM is dying. This is their last chance to do something. Together, in your community, get your AM stations to broadcast all the same information. Give all the people the information. Make sure that that's the place that then when AM is dying a year or two from now, you can walk to Washington and say, look what happened during COVID.
Yeah.
People needed AM radio. We were there. FM radio wasn't doing anything. AM radio still is very important, very useful. And it could, but instead, they didn't do it. They continued to do their broadcasting on the FM, continued their talk radio on the AM. Nobody did anything. And now, as you know, I guess there's a law out that says that all these new cars that are coming out aren't, they're not making them with AM radios.
No, they're not. And that's a shame. That really is a shame.
I was really disappointed, Gary, because we talked about this at a time. I really thought, boy, this would be the opportunity for people to go to Washington and say, see, we need AM radio. See how important AM radio is during something like this?
Well, you know, Washington, they don't even think NPR is worth anything.
Yeah.
What we're going to get into DBTV now, and I got to have you back because there's so much to go over in your life, your battle with cancer and stuff that I want to go over eventually someday with you. You have a philosophy that you feel like that there should be more family-friendly broadcasting topics in broadcasting. And I know you bring that to DBTV. We have a well-rounded group of shows that are on the air besides Main Street. There's a bunch of others that, I hope people tune in and watch all the other shows. We stream worldwide on dbtv.tv. We're all around the world. We stream 24/7. We're excited about the platform. And David started this. When did the thought process come into your brain to put together your own worldwide network?
During COVID. COVID started in 2020. And I was, pardon the expression, I was screwed because my athletes weren't playing, radio was laying off, and TV wasn't hiring. So I'm like, what am I going to do for a year? I have to keep my clients relevant. How do I keep them relevant? What do we do? So I told them, if you remember at that time, all everybody was doing, they were just going on the internet and looking at things. That was the big thing. That's because you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So I said, look, just go on the internet and produce content, whether it be old or new. Just go on, and who knows, maybe somebody will see you, when they're ready to hire, and I'll think of something, And it dawned on me one day, hey, I'll start my own television network, as though it's something very easy to do. You just go down to the corner 7-Eleven and say, hey, let me have the ingredients to start a TV network. So I kind of lucked out because of the fact that I had been in TV as a reporter for 15 years, met a lot of people there, was an agent at that time, I think for 24, 25 years. So I made some calls. It took about 2 or 3 months, and I ended up talking to a guy at Roku. And I told him what my idea was, that I wanted to keep my clients out there. I wanted to have them where they could keep their skills going while they were sitting, while nothing was going on. He said, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to give you a network. Really? So it saved me a lot of money right off the start, because I'm thinking, how can I afford this network? So I had the network, and then it's, okay, how do I get programming? So I went back and I asked my clients at that time, listen, I think I can get a network going where I can show you off. Would you be willing to give me content? I was lucky because some people were doing podcasts at the time. I had a couple people who had just got done doing shows, 13 episodes, and they were looking to sell. And of course, during COVID, nobody was buying anything. So it was a good start. I had about 13 shows, and I said, okay, let's put them on Roku, 12 hours. So if a show ran at 7 a.m., the same show would run again at 7 p.m. So, this went on, and we didn't monetize it at that time. I actually sat down and wrote letters to, I'm thinking who I wrote to the Cancer Institute, Olympics, all these places, Wounded Warriors. Said, I've got a television network. Please send me your commercials. I'll air them for free. because we weren't thinking about monetizing it at that point. It was a playground for my clients to stay active. So that
Right.
went on for about a year. And, every week I'd get a call from somebody who said, "Hey, I heard about your network. I've got a show," or I'd have a friend who would say, "Come on." So at the end of the first year, I had about 33 shows. All of them were uh, first run shows. There was no reruns like Bonanza or CSI. They were all, first run shows. Nothing was older than a year old. I did have a collection of old movies. We were running those, and I had a collection of old cartoons that we were running that were public domain that I could use. But for the most part, everything was first run. And then all of a sudden, after about a year and a couple months, I started getting calls from the hosts. "Hey, I had such and such on as a guest, and he had a chance to see the show, loved the show, loves the network, loves the family style of your network. He wants to buy time." Well, that's something that we had never thought about, monetizing the network. So I thought, okay, well, this would be a great opportunity for, at first, my clients who were doing shows, and then eventually, well, let's see what we can do to monetize the network so we can keep it up and running. So after a while, we ended up, collecting more and more shows. We ended up going from Roku to Amazon Fire. From Amazon Fire, we ended up being on other places like Apple, places like that, other networks. It was
The
amazing.
platforms.
Yeah, other platforms. All of a sudden, we looked in February of this year. It was our 4-year anniversary. We're up to 120 first run shows, most of them exclusive to DBTV, and we were on. We were averaging 800,000 unique viewers a month. Plus, we were in, I think, 70 or 80 different countries from being on all these platforms and everything. It was amazing. I mean, if you would have told me after even a year after we started DBTV in February of 21, oh, by the way, you're going to be on, 800,000 households. You're going to be in these countries. You're going to have over 100 shows. I would have said, "There's no way. You don't understand."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so we're very family oriented. We're very happy to be family centric. We're kind of like the old networks, where, in fact, I tell people I had an opportunity when we were starting out, and we really were breaking even. But I figured if we can break even, that's fine. I can highlight and spotlight my clients while we're breaking even. But I had somebody who said, "Take a look at my show and let me know if you want to run it on DBTV." And it was not a show that we would even think about doing. It was people screaming at each other, hollering at each other, a lot of politics, a lot of religion, a lot of just things that you can see on other networks, not on ours. Now, I was desperate for money at that time, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to take a program like this, or are we going to stay family oriented? But I was so insistent that I don't want somebody experiencing DBTV for the first time to turn us on and see a show that I really don't recommend, that I took because I needed a couple extra bucks.
Yeah.
And it's not what we're about. And then the person would say, "Well, I heard DBTV was family oriented. DBTV was different, but I'm seeing the same junk on here that I'm seeing on the other networks."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was. I tell people it was a hard decision, but it really was an easy decision because we wanted to stay family oriented. Now I look at, and we talked about this too. I look at some shows or some networks that are supposedly family oriented, and I'm embarrassed by what they call family shows. I mean, we take pride in saying you can watch DBTV for 24 hours. You never have to worry about sending your children out of the room. They're never
Yeah.
going to see or hear anything that they're going to question or you have to be afraid about,
Yep.
And there's very few places that really do that anymore. We stay away from politics. We stay away from religion. We stay away from things that are woke, things like that. All we want to do is entertain, educate, enlighten.
Yeah.
We really want every show parents to sit down. The greatest thing in the world was when I would sit down with my mom and dad and we would watch shows together.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it be news or whether it be Ed Sullivan's show, you don't see families don't sit down and watch shows together anymore because
No.
a lot has to do because of schedules, people working, but also, a kid has a TV in his own room. There's no reason to watch what mom and dad are watching. But, you know, I get letters and emails from people that say, you know, I love Sunday mornings when we get to watch a movie with my grandfather. We sit around, watch an old John Wayne movie, watch an old Judy Garland movie. Gary,
Mhm.
boy, that's fantastic. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what the network is about. It's being able to watch with your family and enjoy. You know,
I know that when I first approached you, you had been on my late night show, The Express, and you kind of knew of me. And that's when we became friends about 10, 15 years ago, I guess. And when I kept approaching you about doing a show at the time, I wasn't doing one. COVID had kind of knocked me out of the ballpark, plus something else too, my health. And then when I started approaching you and you said, all right, you send me some new current shows. I don't want the old shows. Send me some new current shows. Show me what you got, and we'll see. And it took a while, but you also told me, Gary, no shenanigans of any kind, no politics, no religion, no sexual content, unless it has to do with a marital thing or something like that. But all family oriented. And and I said, well, you know the kind of shows I do. You said I do, and then you were kind enough to put me on the air at 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights, and I've been thrilled ever since. But there's also something too I want people to know about you, and you can send the check in the mail later. You are probably one of the nicest, kindest gentlemen in the business. You introduced me to John Lieberman, who is a dear friend of mine now, who hopefully we're going to get a show on the network
I
here.
hope so. That would be nice.
But you are one of the nicest gentlemen in the world, and you have always been there for me, always encouraging me, always telling me, hey, I get some calls about you. I get this about you. I get letters, people saying, how good the show is. And I also try to deliver the content that you want. I mean, Don Most,
Yep.
people like that.
Stephanie Powers.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do that. And I think that's the important thing that we need to do here.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that, but my motto's always been, I mean, you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. And
yeah.
you hear, I don't have to tell you, TV and radio is filled with people who aren't the way you and I are, and it's a
No.
shame. I mean, so it's great to hear. I'm embarrassed, but I do appreciate that. That means a lot to me because it just you know it doesn't cost anything to treat people nice.
No.
If you treat people nice, you may just be surprised and get it in return. You know,
Yeah, and my show has really done well on the network, and hopefully we're going to expand and do even more with it. But here's a next question to you: the media is constantly changing, technology is constantly changing, AI is there. We discussed it briefly earlier. What do you see for DBTV coming up in the future? I know they're going to be starting movies very soon, I believe on Saturday or Sunday mornings. And I'm excited about that for everybody, for all our viewers. And what's new that's coming up on DBTV? And where do you see the technology that'll be coming along to be incorporated with DBTV?
we still want to be different. We still want to continue to be family oriented and family centric. So we're always looking to expand into new shows. And I get people sending me shows and giving me ideas for shows. And like I said, I'm still very strict as far as if it's something that I want to see, and I think it's something that my family wants to see, it's probably going to be a good show. But if it's
Yeah.
something that I mean, if people want to see hollering and people throwing wine and stuff on drinks on each other and stuff, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's just not with us.
No.
I mean, I'll take my 50 top shows and put them up against the 50 shows from any other network. Now,
Yeah.
I have some shows that probably, technically probably don't look as good as some network shows, but I'll tell you what, if you look at some network shows, there's some network shows out there that are pretty bad that shouldn't be on today,
Yeah.
So I'm proud of my network. But I'm really more proud of who we have. We have a lot of talented people who are doing shows. I mean, and these people not only people don't know, you also produce your show. You spend a lot of time getting your guests, so people, oh, Gary's got it pretty easy. He just talks to somebody for an hour and that's his show.
No.
People don't know that it's hours that you put into your show to do one show, 1 hour.
Yep.
With
Yeah.
calling and producing and doing background on, and prepping.
Mhm.
But I'm proud of the people I have. Everybody who I have is talented. And not everybody has a background in radio or TV. I have some people who are doctors. I have some people who are veterinarians. They're great in other professions, and they have
Mhm.
shows and they're sharing information and educating us, which is great. And all of them agree and love the fact that they're on a family oriented network, which
Yep.
is so important.
Mike, here's a question for you. Your wife is a talented woman, no doubt about it. How come I don't see her on the network?
Um, she would laugh about that. She's very talented, but she's very shy as far as having a show. I would love to
Yeah.
have her have a show. In fact, I asked her if I said, "Why don't I bring back my talk show and you can sit in with me?" But she doesn't want to do it. So, but
You know who else has a daughter like that? Don Rickles' daughter.
oh, really? Yeah.
She will not come on to be interviewed. She's a stand-up comic, but she won't be. And her husband and I are very, very good friends in California. He doesn't like coming on doing talk either, So it's one of
Listen,
those things.
they had a birthday party for me, I think, a couple years ago, and people who I hadn't seen in years were there. And I asked my wife just to go in front of these people and just say a few words, just thank people for coming, whatever. My wife couldn't even do that. It's just, it's not in her DNA, it's in ours, but
Yeah.
it wasn't in her. I would love to have her have a show, or she's a fantastic cook. I'd love to have her do a cooking show, but like I said, some people.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. That's the funny thing about radio. When people say when I was when I was working something radio stations and stuff in Miami, and I did a little bit here, a little bit there, people would say, "Oh, that's easy. I can get in front of a microphone and talk." And then you'd put them just for an audition, put them in front of a microphone, point the finger, you're on, and they'd be like, "Hell, I, uh, uh, and we'd cut it after about 30 seconds, if that long."
I'll tell you the thing that everybody tells me they can do. Everybody thinks that they can do home shopping. Oh, I can
Ooh.
talk about an object for 30 minutes, but they have no idea that there's people talking in your left ear. There's people talking in your right ear. They may say to you, okay, we're going off this. We're going to another product to sell in 15 seconds. I
Mhm.
mean, the people who do home shopping, I represent a lot of them. A lot of my friends, they're brilliant because it's very, very hard to do. Everybody thinks that they can do home shopping. Oh, I can talk on a subject for 15 minutes. I guarantee it's you can't.
I want to get David Venerable on from QVC up there in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. If you know David, I want him on my program, or one of the hosts. I'd like to get somebody on from there. So if you can arrange that, I would be more than grateful to you.
Yeah,
I'll tell
people
you
on
that.
TV, people either they clam up or they talk and they can't stop whenever you put a microphone in front of them.
I've had a few interviews, a few authors that get on, and you ask one question, and 20 minutes later they're finished with the one question. It's absolutely unbelievable. David, we're almost out of time, and we got about 4 or 5 minutes left. I just want to touch on this very briefly. David Brunner has been our guest here, DB, from DBTV.tv. If you want some more information, go to info@dbtv.tv, and they'll take care of it for you. Don't forget, this show is also seen on DBTV.tv Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. This show will be on, I believe, tomorrow night. We're going to try to get it to David right after this show. But you had a bout with cancer, 4-stage cancer, and very, very briefly, how did that change your life in the direction you were going at the time and where you are now? And how much has it changed your whole perspective on living?
Well, I had it 3 times. I'm a 3-time
Yeah.
survivor,
Yeah.
and the second time I had it really bad. I had a thing called mantle cell lymphoma, which is very bad, and if it comes back, you're a goner. And
Mhm.
they also told me this in the second time I had cancer, you have a 2% chance of survival. So when you're told that, certainly things change. I was in the middle of, I still had my agency. I was still in my 50s. And all you think about is, my God, my wife's going to be a widow. My son's not going to have, I'm not going to be able to see my son's greatest years growing up. And, and my business that I built, so you end up, I was shocked when I heard it, but I felt sorry for myself for about 5 minutes. I said,
Yeah.
look, there's 2 ways I can go here. I can sit down, feel sorry for myself, ask people to feel terrible for me, or I'm going to fight this. And I did. And you know what? We became closer as a family because of this. And if somebody would come to me again and say, okay, Dave, here's the deal. I'm going to give you cancer one more time, but it's going to make you even closer to your son again, and it's going to make you closer to your wife. I would say, where do I sign up?
Yeah.
Because, even though our family just we became so much closer and stronger together. It took me having cancer to be able to say to my son on the phone and in person, I love you, which I should have been saying from the start. So, I make no bones about it. Listen, I don't wish it on anybody. I'm delighted and that I 3-time cancer survivor. I'm very proud of that. But if I were to get it again, if it would make me closer to my family, make me a stronger person, I'd do it again. I'd sign up right away.
David Brunner, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Main Street this afternoon, this evening, or wherever people are going to be watching this particular program. And don't forget, DBTV.TV. Check it out. Great programming, 24/7, seen around the world. He is David Brunner, as we all call him, DB. He is the owner, the CEO of DBTV.TV. And don't forget, this program is also on 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Main Street.
7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Absolutely.
Gary Allen.
And you stay right there, David. I'll be right back with you. And I just want to say to all of you out there, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today. And we certainly enjoy being with you. We're going to be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to take next week off because I've got something I have got to do that I've been putting off forever. But until we meet again, take care of yourselves. Take care of your family. God bless you and have a good one.